Let's talk about how money, goods, and services move in our economy. It's like a giant dance where supply and demand are the partners, and the government sometimes tries to change the music. Understanding this dance is key to making smart decisions, especially when it comes to your money. This episode is brought to you by Stonehill Wealth Management, where we help our clients invest their money into the future. Let's talk about the basics of supply and demand. Think of it like this. Supply is how much of something is available. Demand is how much people want that thing. These two forces affect everything from the price of a candy bar to the cost of a house. So let's talk about what money is and the supply and demand curve around that, right? Money is the lifeblood of an economy. And so supply is impacted by the central bank, or what we call here in America, the Federal Reserve. And it controls how much money is out there. They do this by changing interest rates, printing money, or buying and selling bonds, and other complex methods that I won't really cover today. Demand is people and businesses that want to spend, save, and invest. If interest rates are high, people tend to hold on to their cash. If prices are rising fast or inflation, people want to spend that money quickly before it loses value. The other component in an economy, supply and demand, are goods, or the stuff that we buy. Businesses make goods based on how much it costs them: labor, materials, technology. If the cost of oil goes up, for example, it might become more expensive to make things, so the supply could go down. Demand. People buy goods based on their income, what they like, and the price. If people have more money or prices are low, they'll buy more. Services, or what we get done, right? On the supply side of services, it depends on how many workers there are, their skills, and the technology. If there aren't enough skilled workers, it's hard to provide services. Demand. People want more services when they have more money or when they need certain services like healthcare or tech support. And so these three things interact together in the economy. Let's talk about how it all connects, or the economic cycle. These three things are all connected. More money in the economy can lead to more demand for goods and services, which can push prices up, or inflation. Higher interest rates can reduce the demand for money, which can lead to people spending less and prices falling, or deflation. Problems with money, like supply chain issues, can drive up prices. When the economy is growing, demand typically increases. When the economy slows down or is in a recession, demand typically decreases. And these are times when the government might step in, distorting the signal for market participants. So sometimes the government or central bank tries to change the money supply. This can mess up the natural balance of supply and demand, like changing the rules of the game in the middle of it. Here's how they do it. Distorted interest rates. When the central bank lowers interest rates artificially, it makes borrowing money too cheap. This can lead to people taking on too much debt and creating bubbles in things like housing or stocks. Hidden inflation. If the government prints too much money, prices go up, but not evenly. This can confuse businesses and consumers who might not know if demand is really increasing or if it's just inflation. Bad investments. In a free market, good businesses get money and bad businesses don't. But when the government pumps money into the system, even bad businesses can get funding, wasting resources. Boom and bust cycles. Artificial money can create booms. But when the central bank takes the money back, the boom turns into a bust, and those businesses and organizations that would have normally died had there not been manipulation, then they get really obliterated, and the workforce that should have gotten retrained didn't get retrained, and now they're behind and mad and upset, and it creates all kind of chaos that would have happened earlier, but maybe not at that magnitude. Harming savings. Inflation makes money or savings lose value, forcing people to take risks just to keep up. It also makes workers poorer if their wages don't keep up with prices. Here's why a clear signal matters. When the government messes with the money supply, it messes with the price signals that help businesses and consumers make smart market decisions. Instead of reacting to real supply and demand, people react to fake signals, which can lead to bad investments, bubbles, and crashes. A stable money supply lets the market work naturally, giving people clear signals about when to spend, invest, or save. How do you invest in a distorted world? You got to build your own compass. As an investor, you need to understand that markets are like giant information systems. Prices tell you what people value, what resources are available, and where money should go. But these signals are often distorted. As a matter of fact, I think it's the rule to assume distortion. And so what you want to first do, in my opinion, is build a strong mental model, strong and flexible, but a baseline mental model. Think of it like your internal algorithm that you're always adjusting as you add new information and gain new learning. So the first part of the mental model is understand what money really is and how it changes over time. And we covered that in a previous episode titled, money, or what is money, something to that effect. Recognize that the governments and central banks manipulate supply and demand. So just make that a thing. You don't got to get mad about it. Just understand what it is. Second thing you want to do is recognizing the government distortions, right? Money printing leads to inflation, despite what they say. It may not happen immediately in the area that they're focusing you on, but it almost always happens somewhere. You just got to know where to look. And then it trickles through the rest of the economy over time. Low interest rates lead to mispriced risks because money's cheaper than what it normally would have been. Bailouts keep weak businesses alive, right? So those are kind of 3 points you want to look at that'll create some opportunities. Third is how do I profit from inefficiencies, right? Again, markets are never perfect. They're never efficient. We learned in finance the market is efficient. That market's not efficient. It's very inefficient because it's always operating from a biased perspective. The big money is made by spotting mistakes before everyone else. So it requires patience, it requires conviction, and it requires the ability to be flexible, right? The market doesn't reward know-it-alls, right? It rewards patient, flexible thinkers that understand the principles and sort of navigate how those principles change. Let's look at just 4 examples of market distortions or market biases that if you understand some of the principles, you would have seen things play out, right? So in 2020, COVID shut down, then the government printed just a ton of money into the market. And the stock and crypto booms were driven by the money printing, right? So we didn't see immediate inflation in goods and services. We saw inflation into assets, right? Side note, that's when I really bought Bitcoin, 2020, right? When I saw that happen, I was like, oh, here's where the money's going. The 2008 housing bubble was caused by cheap money and bad debt. The third example is the one that's continuing to play out. And Bitcoin's value, when you understand Bitcoin's fundamental value, is based on the idea that the government will keep printing money in perpetuity to keep the system intact, right? And once you understand the fundamentals around that, Bitcoin becomes the obvious, yang to government money printing's yin. Play the long game, right? So you put all these together, understand how money works, track where the money's flowing, and you want to stay ahead of the crowd with your plan. But here's the real edge. Just don't follow the crowd. Build your own understanding of how the economy works. I promise you, if you can see the world through the eyes of market practitioners in the market, and you see how we look at the news channels, like the news signal to noise ratio is terrible at best, and so you can't rely on the news to build your framework because it's like a social media feed. It's just random information that you have to look at, curate, and process yourself to build your own plan for investing. And you professionals really look at the news to get the biases. That's what I look at it for. I'm like, all right, what are the prevailing biases and how far are they away from the principles that I know to be true that have worked across space and time? And that's the usefulness of that noise, because you say, oh, people just are not understanding the Bitcoin thesis, and they still are not doing it at scale when the evidence is right in their face. Cool. On this dip, I'm going to load up on some more, right? So learn to see the distortions, and you can turn them into opportunities. This is how you build real wealth. For those listening on YouTube, make sure you like, subscribe, and hit the notification button. Y'all be fruitful and go multiply your money.
Philip Washington Jr. is a registered investment advisor. Information presented is for educational purposes only and does not intend to make an offer or solicitation for the sale or purchase of any specific securities, investments, or investment strategies. Investments involve risk and, unless otherwise stated, are not guaranteed. Be sure to first consult with a qualified financial advisor and/or tax professional before implementing any strategy discussed herein. Past performance is not indicative of future performance.